Welcome to the Freedom CEO podcast. It's about becoming the chief decision maker over your life in order to step into a life of freedom. From business, health, wealth, charity, and giving back to just doing life on your own terms. I am your host, Shay Invidiata. I am an award-winning activist, change maker, and a multifaceted impact entrepreneur with over a decade of experience in business, philanthropy, and health and wellness. In this space, I'm going to be bringing you insights, not just from me, but from incredible thought leaders around the globe to help you start making decisions towards living a life of freedom so you can live a life you love. Are you ready, guys? Because we are going all in. Have you heard this phrase before? Sit with women who are committed to personal growth. The conversation is just different. In today's episode, it's just that. It's different. It's elevated. I sat down with a former police detective who became a human potential coach. Andrea Parker is the founder of AP Coaching. She is a secret weapon for high-level entrepreneurs and leaders, helping them to work less, play more, while having more fun. As a highly sought-after coach and renowned international speaker, her insights have been featured in documentaries, transformational podcasts, and Jack Canfield's up-and-coming book called Unstuck. Today, we have a conversation that is going to encourage you how to level up your own game and start playing bigger. So today, joining me on the Freedom CEO podcast, I have the beautiful Andrea Parker, who is a fabulous coach, and we're going to dive into that. Before she made this transition into coaching, though, you were in policing and this passion to serve and help people. And so I'm just so grateful to have you here on the show today. As many of you guys know, law enforcement has a very near and dear spot in my life and in my life's work for basically the last 17 years. So Andrea Parker, welcome. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you. I feel like our paths have crossed in many different realms. So it's all kind of coming together. So I'm really grateful to go even deeper and play in this energy with you.
Yeah. It is crazy because we do know a lot of the same people, within policing. And I just thought it was so fascinating when I first heard of you and the work you're doing now and the journey from where you came from. Obviously there's a connect, right? You go into policing. Well, I mean, you can answer this, but I think a lot of people go into policing because they do have this desire to serve. You do take the oath to protect and serve, but I think that does come from somewhere within, deep within, that you want to do that. And so I'd love to start with your journey there. Why did you choose policing? How'd you get into it?
Yeah, it's a interesting. I think there's a couple parallels for why I got into it, but policing to me is a strange thing because even though it felt more like a knowing than something that I was choosing. And I think it started when I was young. I used to go to my aunt's house in the summers and she watched us in the summers. And I'm such a curious person by nature. I want to know what's going on and I want to know the root of it. So I've always been this detective type. And my mom would always be like, why are you asking me so many questions? She's like, why are you interrogating me? It's like, I'm not interrogating you. I just genuinely want to know. I want to know the root. And when I used to go to my aunt's, there just happened to be a lot of emergency vehicles that would go by her house and you'd be like, get on your bike and go figure out what happened. So I'd go and I'd get on my bike and I'd go past until I figured out what happened. And then I'd come back and I'd report to her. And part of that, I almost fell in love with this idea of knowing what's actually happening. And then as I kind of got older and part of what I desired is I did want to have an impact. I really did want to help people in a way that was I can't even explain it, but something bigger than me. something greater than me.
Mm-hmm.
And policing, like it was either policing or teaching. And it's funny because I kind of do both now. But with policing, I felt like it was going to challenge me more. It was going to challenge me in ways that I didn't actually want to be challenged, but I knew somehow was going to be good for my soul. And it did. Policing to me was I call it like my spiritual boot camp. It was the quickest way for me to get here, but it wasn't necessarily this rainbows and butterflies story of I'm so excited to be a police officer. If anything, I'd say I signed up knowing that this is what I felt like I meant to do, but I did it kicking and screaming.
So interesting. Well, I mean, it's definitely not for the faint of heart, like it's every day you don't know what you're going to walk into, and every day there's a risk of putting your life on the line. So feeling like, yes, impact driven, something bigger than yourself. I think it's important for a lot of police officers to feel that, because it really anchors you for like, why are you actually doing this? Like, why are you serving? Because there's a lot of other paths you could take that have a lot less risk to your own livelihood, to your own life.
I can think of a million other routes that you could possibly take that would be simpler, that you'd end up making more money, that would be more fun. But that at the same time, I do believe a lot of people go in it because they truly want to help in a way that maybe other people wouldn't be able to.
Yeah.
And for me, that's where I think knowing that I was never the typical police officer, and I didn't really necessarily even fit into the culture of policing. So it was kind of weird for me. As I went through, though, I learned that was my superpower. But it took me a little bit to be like, okay, it's okay that I'm not I'm like, why is no one else scared of these things? Why is everyone else excited to drive fast in cars and to go to these like adrenaline running things? And I'm like, I'm terrified. Like, get me paperwork. I'll do paperwork all day long. I'm going to be great at it. And everyone's looking at me like, why are you wanting to do that? Like, that's super boring. But I started to learn, kind of my rhythm in it. And what that led me to is also this desire to want to have a bigger impact outside of just reacting to things.
Yep.
To more like, how can we do this from inspiration? How can we help more people who want to be helped?
And how long did you serve?
I served for about a decade.
Wow. Yeah. So a long time. And as you're kind of going through this thought transition or evolvement, if you will, was that in the middle of the time that you served? Like, when did you start kind of having these bigger kind of ideas and pulls?
So I would say the first time that I started to feel like there's something greater than policing was the first day of police college. I signed up, I arrived there, I sat down, and we're in this auditorium with, 300 other officers. I just remembered something in my heart, like this deep sinking was like, crap, I made a mistake. It's like, this wasn't the route that I was supposed to go. And it's like, I'm in it now. So it actually drove me though, because I felt that way, it actually helped me. So I accelerated through the ranks quicker than any of my peers. I ended up getting off the road. They accelerated me a whole year, which never happens by a pay grade, by a pay class. I was in a specialty unit after 3 years. I got to do things that most people didn't get to do because I was a female officer in a unit where there was basically no other females. So it was like, I got great exposure and I got to do all these things. And so the journey started out of fear. I want to serve. I want to do my best. I really wanted to do my best. But at the same time, it was fear driven. It was also, I don't want to be here. How can I create something outside of this? And then I would say probably 6, maybe 5 years into doing that, things shifted from an internal, I'm terrified, to now, how can I create something that is more aligned with what my heart wants, that's more aligned with where it is that I want to go? Because I wanted a lifestyle. I wanted a life outside of of shift work. I wanted to have playful lifestyle in a lake. I wanted to have a co-creative business with my partner. Like I wanted to travel, all these things. I wanted more impact. I wanted more finances. I wanted more wealth. And that was the shift, I'd say probably within year 5, where I started slowly starting to plant those seeds. And I'm not the one that's going to be like, let's do all or nothing. It's like, I'm all in, but I'm not necessarily all or nothing. So it took me, and it was so much more challenging doing it this way. Probably would have been easier if I just left, but I wanted to stay so that I could transition from inspiration instead of just leaving something that I wasn't fully happy with.
Right.
I'm grateful that I did that, because when I did leave, like I left at the top. I was running a detective unit. Like I could have easily kind of rode that job out for at least another 2 years. I could get my work done in 3 hours. The rest of the time I could focus on my business. I made my own schedule. Like it was pretty easy. But at the same time, I also knew that I've been doing this work enough to know if I stayed in it, now I was staying in it from desperation, because I didn't believe in myself that I could actually create the next step. So I'm like, okay, I know it's time for me to leave. And then when I left, everyone thought I was insane. They're like, you're nuts. Like, why are you leaving this job? Everybody came to me. And when I left, it was December 2019.
Okay. Wow.
So it did not make sense on paper, but it made sense based on what my inner knowing was at the time. And it's funny because 2 months later, that's when the pandemic hit.
Yeah.
Obviously, I didn't know that, but if I would have stayed, I would have had to go back on the road, which would have just burned me out. My adrenals would have crashed. My partner would have had to deal with, like, it would have been a nightmare.
Yeah.
We wouldn't have been able to move up on the lake. We wouldn't have expanded our business. We wouldn't have done all of these things. And it was actually, I was thinking of you, actually. It wasn't until, it was this week, it was maybe a day or two ago. And for some reason, policing came flooded into me. And it was so much gratitude for, wow, I actually got to do so many cool things that so many people would not have experienced in so many different ways. Like I've been in situations that most people wouldn't be able to experience in their whole lifetime. And I got to experience them in like a day. Like the things I got to be part of. And back then I didn't have as much appreciation for it because I was in fear most of the time.
Right.
But looking back now, I was like, I'm so grateful for that. And I can actually see how it's led me to becoming even more of a detective, but in people's beliefs and what people love and all these things. So it's really been a cool journey. And for me, I think police officers, it's a tough position for them to be in for so many different reasons. But I would say the majority of them, they go in because they have such big hearts and they have such a desire to help and to love and to give and do all these things. And then for many different reasons, they kind of are, their souls become beaten down a bit because of all the external stuff that goes on.
Totally. So 10 years of service. Yes, there's a lot of external stuff that goes on, and that could be a whole other conversation in itself. But I would love to, let's jump into 2019. You took a leap of faith. It could have been fear, which I'm sure there was a little bit in there, but rather than not taking the risk on yourself, you decided to step in. You decided to open a new door. You became a human potential coach. And I guess really that's like when you launched your business more like full throttle. Would have been what, the beginning of 2020 kind of thing?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, it kind of sounds obvious as to what a human potential coach could be, but like walk me through that, because there's literally a coach for everything from like confidence coaches to like anxiety coaches. Like there's a coach for everything. So let's just be like, get clear. What is a human potential coach and what's your mission?
It's true. There's titles for everything, and titles I don't think do anything justice, because it's like, I'm a police officer, I'm a teacher, I'm a coach. It's at the end of the day, what I do and what I love to do is I love helping people who are the leaders, who have a big mission, who are the ones already playing the game that they want to play in their life, and helping them to have more fun, to do less, to play more, so that just as a byproduct, by them focusing on their own personal wealth, they're actually then having the lifestyle, the deeper connections, the abundance, all the things that they really got into, what they got into for. And a simplified way of saying that is why I like the word potential, is because I've always had this desire to bring the best out of myself.
Mm-hmm.
And when we can do this from inspiration, when we can do it because we love ourselves, when we do it because it feels good, and then just by us loving who we are, what we do, and playing at our best, whatever that means to you, in my opinion, that's how we have the greatest impact in the world. Like when we live from our hearts. I could just call myself a heart coach. But when we live from our hearts and we're really doing the things that light us up, that's then going to have an impact on other people.
Totally. Well, having more fun, doing less, I think most people could get on board with. I think one of the stumbling blocks, though, just to get to that point, is getting clear on what you actually want. And I think there's a disconnect between what you think you want and what you actually want. Since you're here, like, walk us through, how do you unpack that and really trying to get clear on what you want. And I think because of the last 2 years, there's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of uncertainty for people where they're knowing like they're in a circumstance where they don't have maybe the security they want, and they know that they want to do something else or layer in, right? Like adding in something into their lives, but how to get clarity on really what it is that you want to be doing.
This is one of the most, I would say, important things. It's going to be what you just said, admitting. Like, you have to be able to admit what you want. Like, what is it that you want? And you're right. So one of the most challenging things with admitting what you want is allowing yourself to admit what you want. So why then, if we want more clarity and we want to actually move forward, why wouldn't we admit what we want? It's a lot of the time it comes down to, it doesn't feel safe to fully admit what you want. Or in the past, maybe you're a young kid. I admitted, this is what I want. This is the thing that excites me. You asked your mom for something and mom said no. And it's like, okay, well, that sucks. Why am I going to ask for what I want anymore? Or you get burned, or you get hurt, or you have these unconscious stories of it not feeling safe. So sometimes it's the past reactions and stories about what happened when you admitted what you wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And what also happens is this simultaneous fear of, or what if I'm not capable of that? Or what if I do all these things and I can't get it? It's like, well, that sucks too. So now I'm in this situation where if I'm actually clear on what I want, and if I can't have it the way I want it, or if I don't believe it's possible, then why would I even admit it in the first place?
Right.
So that's typically. But what also happens is, if we're so disconnected and we're so in the logical brain of what we should be doing next, oftentimes it's a thought goal.
Mm-hmm.
It's not necessarily a heart goal. And those are two different things.
Yeah, break that down, because I'm like, as you're saying this, I can already hear people going, what does she mean by that?
Yeah. So for example, I'll use one of my clients for example. She's awesome. So She's very driven. She already has a successful business. And she came to me. She's like, I want to hit 7 figures. Great. Adamant. This is my goal. So then the question is, well, why 7 figures? Like, what is it about that? Like, what is it that you truly want? And often what it is sometimes they're ego goals. For her, I don't believe it was an ego goal. I do think it was a true desire. But the reasoning under it was actually, well, I actually want more time for myself. I want to feel more peace. I want to have more joy. I want to spend time with my partner, and I want to travel, and I want to do these things, and I want to have greater impact. And it's like, okay, well, those are, can you see how the goal is, I want to 7 figures, and how you show up with a 7-figure goal is you're doing all the to-do lists versus this is the experience,
right?
Deeper rooted experience that I want to have. Yet for her, the reason she hadn't fully admitted it, one is she hadn't taken the time to do that. But 2, she also had blocks or limiting beliefs around what was possible.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I have 7 figures, then I can have these things. And that was actually preventing her from actually getting those things.
Right.
So the thinking keeps us safe. If it's a thought or an ego or a logical goal, and there's nothing wrong with logical goals. I'm up until, I don't know, maybe since I started doing this work like 8 years ago, I was a very analytical, very logical figure. I could count on like one hand how many times I could cry. Not in tune with my emotions at all. And it was because when I was younger, I was a very sensitive person. And I learned that's not safe in this world. So I'm going to shut that down. Mm-hmm. So most people who are very in their head and very logical with their goals, for my clients, what I find, they're actually very sensitive, very in tune, very tapped in people. And they had to put a guard up to keep themselves to feel safe.
Right.
So often we have to soften, to let go, so that we can then listen to what's coming through in our heart. But that feels unsafe because now we have to feel, we have to become vulnerable. We have to go a little bit slower than we feel comfortable going. And that's often the difference between, another reason why we don't admit is because we're going so fast towards, like, we have to be doing things all the time. If we go a little bit slower, it feels like, well, I'm behind. I'm not doing the right things. So it's really a practice of tuning back into what feels good. Like, what's an aligned yes? Is this good for my heart? Is this good for me? Am I doing this from inspiration?
Yeah. And I think it's also too, it's important to note that our bodies, our brain is wired as a reflex or a default to keep us safe, right? So when you think of the thought patterns, anytime that, you're thinking of expanding or there's risk, unknown, your body just inherently, like, that's how we were born, is to keep us safe. And yet sometimes that is what actually can start to harm you. But when you become aware that that's actually how your brain functions, it's how your nervous system functions, right? Like, the body is always in a state of not alert in the sense of your adrenals are high, but your body is ready. It's like paying attention that if there's danger of any level, it wants to notify you. And so when you think of some of these thought patterns, once you can identify it because you're aware that this is how we function, you go, okay, yeah, that's my body telling me right now, you're stepping out into uncharted territory. And you can go, yeah, and it's okay. I've got it. And you can move more into that heart-centered thought process that you're speaking about and reminding the body that it's okay. I am safe. I'm capable. I'm worthy. I'm deserving. and I'm going to do it because I can. Right?
100%. And that's why it's important to practice with the little things. Like when I left policing, it's like, it wasn't the first time I had ever started to listen to my heart. It was like, that would have been too much. That would have been, I wouldn't have had the confidence in the process to be like, okay, I know the principle, even though this makes no logical sense on paper, there's certain things that you have to practice. And that's something that my wife Mel and I, like, even when we bought this house, it's like it didn't make sense on paper, but we had this desire. So since I was 18, since she was 18, before we even met each other, we're like, we want to live in Muskoka, so in Canada, cottage country, on the lake, and have like this fucking lake house lifestyle.
Yes.
And we had been taking steps, and then when we started getting closer to moving up here, we were taking baby steps. Like, I really do believe in taking aligned action. So you still need logic, aligned action. You still need a plan. And at the same time, also integrating the heart strategy. Like, I really do believe that both are important, not just heart and not just logic. But there was a certain point where we knew exactly what we had to admit, and we kept refining it till we were so clear. Like, we could see the house. Right. We had absolutely no idea how it was going to work. We had to sell our house for high. We had to buy low. This was in the middle of just a gong show of a housing market. Lake houses were impossible to buy. And we were just so clear. So we admitted it. So that's the first step. You need to admit. You need to commit then. So you need to then commit to, I am all in on this. I'm not going to kill myself doing it. So it doesn't have to be all or nothing, but I am 2 feet in, jumping in on this. And then the third step is to get into action. So taking those baby steps. And for us, we would come up and we would drive for like 3 hours. We'd look at a property. It wouldn't be the right one. We'd drive back another 3 hours. And we did this for like 2 years until we were like, let's get really serious. And we kept missing out. So we were meditating. Like, we were like continuing to pour time into like what's feeling right. And one of the almost like this intuition hit came was, if you sell your house, somehow you're going to find the house you're looking for. I'm like, well, that makes no sense, because why am I going to sell my house hoping I'm going to find something that we have not found? And it was also like 3.5 hours away from all our family, our friends. Mel had a painting business there, so she would have to close her. Like, it just didn't make sense on paper, but we had been doing enough that I knew if we followed my intuition and followed my heart, it was going to work out. So we did. We listed our house. We went up north. We rented a cottage for a week, and we sent an email to our network. And Mel ended up talking with one of the girls from our hockey team, and she's like, this might be a good fit. We have our cottage. We're getting divorced. You can go check it out. So we checked it out. Like, yeah, this is it. This is our dream house. And they were in a messy divorce, which sucked for them. Great for us, because they couldn't figure anything out. This house was a shell when we bought it. So they had done a major renovation, but nothing was complete on the inside.
Okay. Wow. Yeah.
Nothing. Like, there was no plumbing, there was no electrical, there was no stairs to get to it. So here's the thing. We sold our house. 12 hours later, we bought this one privately.
Wow. That's crazy.
But this is where it gets, you really have to be trust in the process. And this is where I think a lot of people aren't willing to do the thing because it's scary. Like, living from your heart is terrifying sometimes. And for this example, this is a bit of an extreme one. So when we bought it, it's at like 10% complete, maybe 15%. In order to get a mortgage, it has to be 98% complete. So we had to do a massive renovation in a month and a half on a house that we did not own. So they still owned the house, hoping that they wouldn't then pull the deal and take all of our money.
Right.
And the renovation in the middle of a lockdown, hoping that it would work out, while, because we're business owners, we had to also apply for our taxes sooner. Like, it was this, we needed everything to match up to a T in order for this to move. And it did. But during the time, it was not like, oh yeah, it's going to be okay. It was like, are we going to be okay? This is terrifying.
Yep.
And sometimes when you admit what you want, when you commit, when you get into action, the fourth thing that you really need to do is to challenge yourself to do the thing that's good for your heart, even if it makes no sense, even if it's terrifying.
Yeah, big time. And I mean, this is where you're sitting today. It all worked out.
It all worked out. We learned a lot, and we also were smart enough to know, okay, what are our worst case scenarios? Can we live with that?
Right.
And we were okay living with our worst case scenarios.
So let me ask you, because you've said this a couple of times now, and I think this also applies to just even the example that you shared around all in doesn't mean all or nothing. And yeah, you've said this a couple of times. And for some people, like, we're so conditioned with the other phrase of like, it's all or nothing. Right?
Yes.
So like, what does that applicably, like, what does that mean?
And maybe I'm saying it too, because it's so even fresh in my mind right now. Like, it's such especially because the realm that I work in, a lot of my clients are so driven. They're used to having to push, to force, they're willing to like just kill themselves doing the thing because they had to. I had to. Like a lot of them are the people pleasers, the overachievers, the ones who are the perfectionists, the ones who are overperforming in everything that they've done. And what got them here, what got us here, was often pushing ourselves to the max in order for that to happen.
Right.
Like, and I know that as a competitive athlete, like, and when I go in something, I do go all in. And in the past, what I did is I went all in to the point where now it's I'm not taking care of where's my health? Where's my joy? Where is my free time outside of these things? And I do believe that it does make sense to go that route until it doesn't. And sometimes you just have to. Like, if you're starting a business off the ground, if you have a new baby, you have a new relationship, at first it makes sense that you put all of yourself into it.
Sure.
But that's not sustainable. And what happens is it then burns us. And often we burn out. And then we think, okay, well, that's terrifying. I don't want to do that anymore. So now I'm going to swing on the opposite end of the spectrum. I'm just going to sit here for a bit until I'm like, okay, I need to jump back in again. Like working out, it's a good example. Because even for me today, I used to be a personal trainer. I was a competitive athlete. I would do 2 a days. Like, I was so regimented. And it wasn't even necessarily to a point where it was even beneficial. Like, I was overtraining. I burned myself out. I went all in to the point where, like, this is not sustainable. And then over the years, I started to pull back on my training and did some work to kind of heal that relationship. But what I was thinking of today when I was going to do a workout, I was like, oh, I don't know. I don't want to force it. So I was like, am I just using this as an excuse now? Is it that I don't want to force it, or is it that I'm avoiding it because it's uncomfortable?
Right.
So I'm like, oh, be avoiding because it's uncomfortable. So I did the workout and it felt good. But I think this is where a lot of us can get stuck, because how do you find the happy middle ground where you can still give your best, do your best, put your energy and effort towards something without fully losing yourself completely, your energy, all of the things. And part of that is just coming from a new way of doing it. Are you doing it from inspiration? Are you doing it because of a fear based, or because you're not loving yourself? You don't feel enough. Some of those internal reasons why we originally do it. Or is it how you used to do it? Like, a lot of us were ingrained in, this is how you have to do it.
Right.
And I think that's the old way.
Yep.
Like, I believe even when it comes to business, like a lot of the time it didn't make sense back then for some business owners to focus on other areas outside of business because you do have to put focus in.
Sure.
But at the same time, it's like, I believe you can have a great business and a great relationship and a great lifestyle and it doesn't have to impact the other. If you actually flip it on the other side, it's going to positively impact it. But we have to change our relationship with what's the intention behind why we're doing something.
Yeah. And as you're, sharing and explaining this, the word that keeps coming up for me is commitment. And I think that if we did a reframe on going all in is giving yourself, like, you are committed to that, and using relationships, if you are in one, is a really great example, because just because you're married or you have a partner that you are committed to does not mean that everything else in life disappears. And then that's the only thing you're doing is just that. But on the flip side of that, you don't say to your partner, I'm all in, but you only give yourself 50%, because you are slicing the pie, if you will, at work, different projects, friends, family. It's like, no, both can actually coexist at the same time. And like you said, around not burning yourself out. And that's where we step into like creating boundaries and making sure that what we're saying yes to is in alignment to what we are committing to, what we are saying we're all into, as opposed to all in and nothing else, all or nothing. And then you dismiss everything else around you, which is not healthy, causes all kinds of depletion, depravity, like all of that kind of stuff, which eventually leads to some form of resentment. It can anyways, So it's more just recognizing, like as you were talking, I'm like, this really, for me, it just feels around saying, if you're going all in, it's what you're committing to.
Yeah.
Right. And if you're going to commit, you should do it at 100%. And then that's like a promise you're making to yourself.
Yeah.
You should keep that and honor that.
And it's true, because if you ever think of a time where you've had something like big in your life happen. Doesn't even have to be something big. It's the moment you decide.
Yeah.
The moment you committed. But you can even be 90% committed, so to speak, or 90% in it, but it's still not going to happen until you're 100% committed.
Totally.
And it's usually the fear. So the good news is the only thing holding people back from 100% committing is a fear. That's it. Part of it is associating, like, because what you were saying before with our brains, for example, it's like if you think of your conscious mind, which is like the size of the football.
Yeah.
That's the part of you that says, I want to commit 100%. I'm going to commit to my business. I'm going to commit to being in a relationship, whatever it is that you're saying you want.
Right.
But then you have the subconscious, which is going to be that football field relative to the size of that, where it's like 98% of your reactions, your beliefs, how you actually show up is going to be based on those unconscious.
Right.
So for most people, they can say that they're committed or that they're all in or that they're going to do this. But until they fully, truly decide energetically or however you want to look at it, it doesn't happen. And it's because of those unconscious fears, those patterns.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay, let's take this like a bit further, because I think somebody can say, I'm all in, I'm committing 100%, I'm taking actions that support what I'm committing to. Okay. Another way to understand that is in alignment.
Yeah.
But sometimes there's certain words these days that are a bit woo and trendy, and people like get lost in being like, I don't, that doesn't resonate with me, So try breaking it down a little clearer. sometimes. So you're taking action to support what you're committing to. And yet you'll find that there are many people that will still say, it's not happening for me.
Mhm.
I feel blocked. I'm doing all the right things, but I must be doing something wrong because it's not transpired. It's not happened. You know, I even think of the story you shared about the house. And I know there's many people that will go, that's so great, Andrea, that happened for you. I could do what you did, and yet that wouldn't happen for me. And yes, there's a limiting belief there, but I think a lot of it has to still do maybe with like subconscious blocks. But I would love for you to just take that and speak to that a little bit, because many people can take these actions that support what they want to be doing and then still look at other people and go, it's working for them, but it's not working for me.
Yeah. And it's a frustrating place because for many different reasons. And I can totally relate. Like, yeah, on the outside, it looks like, okay, they just did these things.
Yeah.
The truth is, knowing this, we did so much inner work to make this happen that it's basically, if you know the laws of the universe, you can use them to your advantage. And then people are going to look at you and be like, you're so lucky. Your life is so lucky. It's like, it's not lucky. I'm just taking the principles and I'm just applying them.
Right.
So what are the principles that I applied? Well, one of them is if you challenge yourself to do what your heart truly wants, you'll be supported.
Right.
And things will happen for you that will not happen for other people.
Mm-hmm.
But you need to believe it. So we have a common mentor and friend. So Dr. Lee Janelle, and one of the things that she teaches is you don't create what you want. You create what you believe.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't believe that it's going to happen subconsciously, then it's not going to happen. And most people actually have no idea what the subconscious beliefs are.
Yep.
So when people come to me, most of them, and these are very self-aware individuals who've done a lot of work on themselves. And typically when they come to me, they're like, I've done all my self-worth stuff. I've got my beliefs down. And then once we start doing the work, they're like, fuck, I haven't even started the work on some of this stuff because I didn't realize that we could go deeper in this area. And beliefs and blocks and all these things coming up, they're not bad. It doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. Every single human has limiting beliefs and blocks. If you think that you don't, then you're just tricking yourself because you do. Everybody does, or you're not playing a big enough game. Yep. So you can also reframe it so that instead of I feel blocked, I feel stuck on this, what's wrong with me? And that usually perpetuates more lower self-worth, feeling shitty about yourself, not taking action. If you can reframe it as I'm playing a bigger game, and because I'm playing a bigger game now, there's going to be more shit that's going to pop up on my road for me to then release. And I'm not a huge believer, or not a huge fan, I guess, of sitting in the old stories. As long as you're in a story, you're stuck. I love games. So I love games. I love people who are working towards something, creating something. If you focus on the goal or the intention, the desire that you're creating. So for us, it was the house. Mm-hmm. We were so focused on that when things did pop up, beliefs did pop up. So we have mentors, we have coaches. We are trained and certified in at least 3 or 4 different methods for releasing subconscious blocks. We did that work on ourselves pretty much daily. Wow. We had a dream team around us. We had someone who was helping us energetically remove crap. We had someone self-consciously removing stuff. We were continuously talking about our dreams and goals with friends who got it. Like, we did not get here by ourselves. We had a team of great people. Yep. And we also worked our way up to this team. So don't feel like, if you're like, well, I don't know who my team is, start with one person, start with yourself.
Yeah.
Start with a partner, start with hire a coach, hire a mentor, find somebody in your corner who can help you do that. But if we use the blocks as an excuse, they're not an excuse.
Right.
It's just a frustrating place to be. And the only reason we have it is because we've associated that it's going to feel unsafe doing it. It's not going to be safe enough for us to do it. Just like what you're saying about, okay, well, if my brain, my body, my beliefs fully supported it and they knew that there was going to be more good out of this than bad, then you're all in.
Right.
But it's somewhere along there, it's like, well, this is going to be not so good. So I don't necessarily want to do it. And usually it's connected to when we're young, when we're children. So having some practices, some tools to help you to dissolve that, but also just really stacking the benefits. Like, how can this be so, us buying this house, how is that going to impact our relationship? It's going to make it even better. How is this going to be supportive for family? It's going to be even better. And we just kept doing that until our belief was so strong that we were like, okay, we know there's going to be fears. We're going to do it anyways.
Right. Yeah. And I think it's the importance of like doing the inner work. It never really ends, and so even still, like, yes, you brought up like getting a coach. There's so many different things online even that are free. I mean, or like master classes, masterminds, where people are offering this introduction into self-evolvement and unpacking it, and you brought up Dr. Leese. I've been working with Dr. Leese for, almost a decade now, and she uses all different types of methods and energetics. And, I know you do the same, very similar, since we share that same commonality. But it's like, no matter how much work you do, there's always something that will come up. It's not like you ever get to this point where you're like, I'm perfect, I'm done. It's like, no, it's this continuum, right? And like, I always use like the analogy of an onion, because you're like peeling back these layers to get to the core of like what the issue is. And so many of us don't even realize that we have these subconscious beliefs, these limiting beliefs, the negative narrative that, we've really been sitting in. And it might not actually feel negative. Sometimes it doesn't even feel negative. You just identify it as that's normal. Meanwhile, if you're in the work, doing the work, you'd come to this realization that like what you've been carrying, what you've been sitting in is not, it doesn't support your higher self. And it's not supporting what you're wanting to build for your life. You just had a mastermind not too long ago. I believe it was called Accelerate Your Growth. Is that what it was called?
Yeah.
And, for those of you guys, if you don't know Andrea Parker, make sure you do follow her. If you are watching, you've seen her handle come up on the screen, and then it'll be in the show notes everywhere. So we will be linking it up. But throughout the year, Andrea does incredible work like this. We're actually in a mastermind together right now. And so there's ample opportunities that if you're open and you're wanting to try something that maybe you've never done before, I would encourage you to connect with Andrea. And also too, I'll just mention, really exciting, you are going to be taking the stage as one of the speakers at the MYM, which is Monetize Your Mind Conference in September in Alberta. Tell us a little bit about that. What is it?
Well, okay, so it's going to be so fun. It's our first time West Coast too for Canada, so we're extra excited.
Yeah.
Where this was birthed. So this is Sarah Swain's baby, and what I love about this is she's such an example of someone who's creating something from her heart. Like if anybody's in her world and her realm, you would have seen really this gravitational shift that she's even having now, where she's even more heart-centered, and you can see that coming through in what she's creating. So this conference is going to be something that it creates choice, it creates freedom, it creates solutions, it creates independence. And it's a whole bunch of really amazing heart-centered humans coming and sharing about how you can basically create your own wealth, how you create your own, how you can create the life that you love is what I would say the best way that you can do it. And what I get to talk about, and I'm still playing with how I want to do this, but it really is this experience. What's your experience as you're creating this life that you love? So yes, it's great to have a great impact and have all these things, but how can you also have more fun, and joy, and play and experience? And then as a byproduct, you're going to make more.
Yeah, totally. I love it. And like I said, I'm going to be linking up all the details for this conference. So if you are wanting to attend, make sure you check out the show notes.
Yes.
It is going to be, I'm going to say radical. Like this is really the first of its kind in Canada around freedom, health, wealth, personal freedom as well, just in general. So I'm excited for you. I can't wait for you to take the stage. And tell us, before I kind of let you go, what is next for Andrea? How can we find you? How can people best connect with you?
Well, because we're part of a mastermind, so what's coming up for me is really expanding my reach. So what's coming up for us is the next level of how we can have an impact. That's why I got into policing. That's why I got into this, is to truly help people connect with their hearts, live the life that they love while having it all, so to speak. So there's going to be a lot of opportunities in ways that we can do that. But I would say easiest way to connect and kind of follow along on that journey is going to be through my Instagram handle that's on there. We also have one thing I did want to offer just as a thank you for you and for your listeners, is just a simple tool to help connect people to their hearts more. Just a 5-minute tool that I used in policing every day. And I still use it now anytime that I want to get a little bit more clear on what it is my heart's saying. So I can give the link to you. Perfect. I believe it's just my website, Andrea Parker Coaching /meditation. But what's next for me is really expanding this message of we're not meant to just have business. We're not meant to just live a life that is okay. We're meant to truly experience life to its fullest, whatever that means to you.
Right. I love it. I love, love, love. And this might actually lead into my final question for you, is because you're on the Freedom CEO podcast. And when you think about becoming or being the CEO of your life, even if you're not a business owner, which you are the CEO in that capacity. But when you think of being the CEO of your life, how has taking ownership over your decisions brought you freedom?
In this resonates so much in a lot of areas, but I really believe that we're creators. We're meant to be creators. So being a CEO, it just means you're a creator.
Right.
So what that does, it allows you to decide what it is that you want to create. Where do you want to put your energy? If you have your buckets, what do you want to fill your buckets with? And then from there, the cool part about that is because we're always growing and expanding, the job's never done. We're always having more desires and learning and all these things. So it kind of sounds too big, but it really is this limitless possibilities that you really do get to create something that you love, like truly love, that brings you joy. And that's fun.
I love it. Andrea, thank you for joining me today and just sharing with us so much good value. And I can't wait. I'm going to have you back like in a year from now. We'll have to do like a check-in, or maybe after the conference, see how that went, speaking on stage. But yeah, just thank you for being here.
I'm so grateful. I feel like I could talk to you for forever. So I'm very grateful for you.
Thanks for tuning into the Freedom CEO podcast. If you got value out of today's show, I would love for you to leave a review as it will help my show reach other people as well. You know what to do. Download this episode, click the like and subscribe button. If you feel like spreading more love, hop over to Instagram and share today's show in your stories. Remember to tag Shane Vidiata and the Freedom CEO. My DMs are always open, so drop me a line. I'd love to connect. Until next time, keep owning your decisions to live a life of freedom. Live a life you love.